I am standing outside my parents' house right now, holding a piece of paper that could change everything. My hands are shaking. For 30 years, my family called me the failure, the invisible child, the one who would never amount to anything. They forgot my birthdays. They skipped my school events. They talked about my siblings like they were gold and treated me like I was dust. But today, I am about to walk through that door and show them exactly who I became while they were not watching. Before I take you back to where this all began, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever been the one nobody believed in, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to my childhood, to the moment I first realized I did not matter to the people who were supposed to love me the most. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White fence, green lawn, 2 cars in the driveway. My father Gerald was a construction engineer who built bridges for a living, but never learned how to build a connection with me. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a voice that could silence a room. Everything he did was about achievement, about winning, about being the best. If you were not first place, you were invisible to him. My mother Patricia taught high school English. She spent her days nurturing other people's children and came home too exhausted to nurture her own. At least that is how it felt to me. She had warmth, but it was reserved, rationed out carefully. And somehow, I always ended up at the bottom of that ration list. Then there were my siblings. Kevin was 4 years older than me, built like an athlete with the kind of confidence that made people gravitate toward him. He played football, basketball, baseball. Whatever sport was in season, Kevin dominated it. Our father worshipped the ground he walked on. Every dinner conversation revolved around Kevin's latest game, Kevin's stats, Kevin's future scholarship. And then there was Stephanie, 3 years younger than me, with blonde curls and bright blue eyes that made everyone smile. She was smart, beautiful, charming. Our mother treated her like a princess, spending hours helping her with homework, braiding her hair, taking her shopping. Stephanie was the golden girl, the one who could do no wrong. And me, I was Wade, the middle child. The one who was not athletic like Kevin, not beautiful and brilliant like Stephanie. I was just there existing in the space between 2 stars, never quite bright enough to be noticed. The first time I truly understood my place in this family was on my 8th birthday. I remember waking up that morning excited, expecting balloons or pancakes, or at least a simple happy birthday. But when I came downstairs, everyone was rushing around. Kevin had a football game. Stephanie had a dance recital, and somehow, in all the chaos, my birthday had been forgotten. Nobody remembered until that evening when I quietly made myself a peanut butter sandwich and sat alone at the kitchen table. My mother walked in, saw me sitting there, and her face went pale. "Oh my God, Wade, I am so sorry, honey. We completely forgot." She hugged me, promised we would celebrate the next day. But the next day never came. There was always something more important. The second memory that carved itself into my heart was the school talent show when I was 10. I had been practicing piano for months, learning a piece by Beethoven that made my fingers ache. I was so proud. I told my parents about the performance weeks in advance, reminded them the night before, left a note on the refrigerator. But when I walked onto that stage and looked out at the audience, their seats were empty. They had taken Kevin to an away game in another city. The music teacher, Mrs. Henderson, found me afterwards sitting alone on the edge of the stage while other kids ran into their parents' arms. She asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. That night, I made a decision without even realizing it. I stopped expecting anything from my family. I stopped asking for attention, stopped hoping for recognition. I became exactly what they treated me, as invisible. The comparisons never stopped as I grew older. Every dinner was the same. My father would ask Kevin about practice, about scouts, about which colleges were reaching out. My mother would discuss Stephanie's grades, her friends, her plans for the future. And when they finally glanced my way, It was with the kind of polite disinterest you might show a distant relative you barely knew. I remember one night I was maybe 12 years old, and I had just gotten my report card. Straight A's. I was so excited to show my father, thinking maybe this would be the thing that finally made him see me. I handed him the paper, my heart pounding. He looked at it, nodded, said good job, and then turned back to Kevin to discuss his upcoming championship game. That was it. 2 words. Good job. And then I was forgotten again. My father said something that night that has echoed in my mind for over 2 decades. He was talking to a neighbor who had stopped by bragging about his children. Kevin is going to get a full athletic scholarship, he said proudly. And Stephanie, she is going to get into a top university, no doubt about it. The neighbor asked about me. My father paused, shrugged, and said, Wade will probably just do something ordinary. Nothing special. I was standing in the hallway listening. He did not know I was there. Or maybe he did, and just did not care. Either way, those words became a prophecy I spent the next 20 years trying to disprove. High school was a blur of trying and failing to matter. I threw myself into academics thinking maybe if I was the smartest, they would finally notice. I joined clubs, won awards, made honor roll every semester. But no matter what I achieved, it was never enough. When I got a 98 on a calculus exam, my father said that is nice, and went back to watching Kevin's game film. When I won second place in a state writing competition, my mother said she was proud, but spent the rest of dinner talking about Stephanie's performance in the school play. I even tried sports once. I figured maybe that was the language my father spoke, the only currency that mattered in our house. I tried out for the basketball team. I practiced for weeks, shot hoops until my arms were sore, ran drills until I could barely breathe. I did not make the team. And when I told my father, hoping for some encouragement, maybe even some comfort, he just shook his head. I told you, Wade. You are not built for this. Do not waste your time on things you cannot win. That was the moment I stopped trying to earn their love. Instead, I retreated into myself. I spent hours alone in my room reading. Not fiction, not fantasy, but books about money, about investing, about building wealth. I did not know why at the time, but something about those books spoke to me. They promised that if you were smart enough, disciplined enough, patient enough, you could build something that no one could take away from you. My mother noticed once, saw me reading a book called The Intelligent Investor. She laughed and said, "Why are you reading that boring stuff? You should go outside, make some friends, be more like your sister." I just nodded, closed the book, and waited until she left to keep reading. Those books became my escape. They became my education. And eventually they became my salvation. Then came the graduations. Kevin graduated from college first with a degree in sports management and a job offer to coach at a local high school. My parents threw him a party that must have cost thousands of dollars. They rented a venue, invited the entire extended family, gave speeches about how proud they were, how Kevin had always been destined for greatness. 2 years later, Stephanie graduated from high school as valedictorian. Another party, another celebration. My mother cried happy tears, told everyone who would listen that her daughter was going to be a doctor someday. The house was filled with flowers and balloons and congratulations. And then there was my graduation. I finished college with a degree in finance, a 3.8 GPA, and a job offer at a small investment firm. No party, no celebration. Just a regular dinner at the kitchen table where my father looked at me and said, "So what exactly do you do at this job?" I tried to explain, but his eyes glazed over within seconds. He interrupted me to ask Kevin about his coaching position. That night, I made a vow to myself. I wrote it on a piece of paper and kept it in my wallet for the next 15 years. It said, "I will become more successful than they ever imagined. Not for them, for me." After college, I disappeared into my work. The investment firm was small, but gave me opportunities that larger companies never would have. I learned everything I could, worked 12-hour days, studied the markets like they were scripture. My salary was modest, but I lived like a monk. Small apartment, used car, no vacations. Every spare dollar went into my investment accounts. I did not tell my family any of this. They never asked anyway. At holiday gatherings, they would occasionally remember I existed, ask me how work was going. I would say fine, and they would nod and change the subject. In their minds, I was still the invisible child, still the failure who would never amount to anything. What they did not know was that my portfolio was growing. Slowly at first, then faster. I made smart investments, took calculated risks, reinvested every dividend. By my late 20s, I had saved over $500,000. By 30, I had crossed $1 million. But I never said a word. I kept driving my old Honda. I kept wearing clothes from discount stores. I kept showing up to family events and sitting quietly in the corner while everyone else talked about how wonderful Kevin and Stephanie were. There was a sick kind of satisfaction in it, honestly. Watching them underestimate me. Watching them assume I was struggling while my bank account grew larger than any of theirs. But there was pain, too. Deep old pain that never quite went away. The child in me still wanted them to see me, to love me, to be proud of me. But the man I had become knew that their approval was not worth chasing anymore. The years kept passing. I got promoted, then promoted again. By 35, I was managing a multi-million-dollar investment fund. I bought my first property, a modest apartment in a good neighborhood. Then my second, which I rented out for passive income. My net worth climbed past $2 million, then 3, then 4. Meanwhile, my family remained blissfully ignorant. They still thought I was some low-level paper pusher barely scraping by. My mother would sometimes send me articles about budgeting tips or frugal living as if I needed help managing my finances. My father never asked about my career at all. Kevin, by this point, was still coaching high school sports. He was good at it, well liked by his students, but he had never quite reached the heights our father had predicted. He had also developed expensive tastes. New car every few years. Big house in a nice suburb. Country club membership. What nobody talked about at family dinners was the mountain of debt he was buried under. Stephanie became a doctor just like our mother had always predicted. But medical school loans and a lavish wedding and an even more lavish house had left her finances stretched thin. She and her husband, a fellow physician named Thomas, looked wealthy on the outside, but were barely keeping their heads above water. I knew all this because I watched. I listened. While they ignored me at family gatherings, I observed their stress lines, their tight smiles, their careful avoidance of money topics. They were living the American dream on credit, and the bills were coming due. The breaking point came at Stephanie's wedding 3 years ago. It was an extravagant affair, held at a vineyard in Napa Valley. My parents spared no expense flying out the entire family, putting everyone up in luxury hotels. During the reception, my father stood to give a toast. He talked about Kevin first. My firstborn son. He said, his voice thick with pride. A man who has dedicated his life to shaping young athletes just like I always knew he would. Then he turned to Stephanie. And my beautiful daughter. He continued, a brilliant doctor who found a brilliant husband. I could not be more proud. I waited. Surely he would mention me too. Even just a sentence. A single acknowledgement that his other child existed. But he simply raised his glass and said to the happy couple. And then he sat down. I felt the eyes of a few distant cousins flicker toward me with something like pity. One of them, an aunt I barely knew, leaned over and whispered, "Is everything okay with you, Wade? You seem so quiet. Do you need any help? Any money?" I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and announce that I could buy this entire vineyard with cash and still have millions left over. But I did not. I just smiled, said I am doing fine, thank you, and excused myself to get some air. That night, alone in my hotel room, I pulled up my investment portfolio on my phone. $4,300,000. 15 years of discipline, sacrifice, and silence. I stared at the number for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. I realized I had two choices. I could keep this secret forever, let them go to their graves believing I was a failure, Or I could show them the truth, not to gloat, not to prove them wrong, but to finally step out of the shadows and claim my place in the light. I chose the latter. I planned it for Thanksgiving. The whole family would be there, gathered at my parents' house like always. Kevin and his wife, Stephanie and Thomas, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone who had ever looked past me, pitied me, dismissed me. They would all be in one room. I printed out my latest account statement, highlighted the total, folded it carefully, and put it in my jacket pocket. When I arrived at my parents' house that November afternoon, everything was exactly as expected. Kevin was in the living room holding court, telling stories about his football team's recent victory. Stephanie was in the kitchen accepting compliments on her medical career. My parents beamed at both of them, their golden children, their sources of pride. And me, I sat in the corner, nursing a glass of water, invisible as always. Dinner was the usual affair. My father talked about politics, about the economy, about how tough things were getting for hard-working people. He worried aloud about retirement, about whether he had saved enough. Kevin nodded along, mentioned that he had just bought a new truck. Stephanie talked about renovating her kitchen. Then my mother looked at me with that pitying expression I had grown to recognize. "Wade, honey, how are you doing? Do you need anything? We worry about you sometimes, living alone, working that job of yours." Kevin smirked. "Yeah, little brother. You doing okay? I know things must be tight." Something in me snapped, not in anger, in clarity. The moment had arrived. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded paper. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I have been wanting to share something with the family." I unfolded the statement and placed it in the center of the table. For a moment, no one moved. Then my mother leaned forward, squinting at the numbers. I watched her face change. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something I had never seen directed at me before: shock. "Wade," she whispered. "What is this?" "That is my investment portfolio," I said. "Current value, $4,300,000. I also own 2 properties worth about $1.2 million combined, mortgage-free." The room went dead silent. Kevin's smirk vanished. Stephanie's face went pale. My father stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. "How?" my father finally managed. "How is this possible?" "I have been investing since I was 22, I said. "While you all thought I was just some paper pusher, I was building this. Every dollar I saved, every promotion I earned, every risk I took. I did it alone, without help, without recognition, without any of you believing in me." The silence stretched on. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, recalculating everything they thought they knew about me. "Why did you never tell us?" my mother asked, her voice breaking. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. "Because you never asked. Not once in 30 years did anyone in this family ask about my dreams, my goals, my achievements. I was the invisible child. Remember, the one who would just do something ordinary." My father's face crumpled. He suddenly looked old, fragile, ashamed. "Wade, we did not." I held up my hand. "I did not do this to make you feel guilty. I did this because I needed to stop being a ghost in my own family. I am not a failure. I never was. You just never bothered to look." I left my parents' house that evening feeling lighter than I had in decades. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just free. The weight of 30 years of invisibility had finally been lifted from my shoulders. The weeks that followed were strange. My mother called almost every day, apologizing, crying, asking how she could make things right. My father, never good with emotions, sent me an email. It was awkward and rambling, but somewhere in the middle he wrote, "I am proud of you, son." I should have said it sooner. It was not enough to erase the past, but it was a start. Kevin reached out too, though his motives were less pure. He asked if I could give him some investment advice, maybe help him out with a loan. I told him I would be happy to teach him about financial planning, but I would not be his bailout. He needed to learn the same lessons I did, that wealth comes from discipline, not shortcuts. Stephanie was the hardest to read. She congratulated me with a tight smile at Christmas, but I could see the jealousy simmering beneath the surface. Her whole identity had been built on being the successful one, the accomplished one. My revelation had disrupted her narrative. I did not hold it against her. We all have our struggles. As for me, I started seeing a therapist. Not because I was broken, but because I had spent so long suppressing my pain that I did not know how to process it now that everything had changed. She helped me understand that my worth was never about money. The $4 million did not make me valuable. I was always valuable. The money just gave me the freedom to finally believe it. I also started living differently. I bought a nicer apartment, not extravagant, but comfortable. I took a vacation for the first time in years, spent 2 weeks in Portugal, just walking along the coast and thinking about my life. I started dating again and met a woman named Harper at a coffee shop near my building. She was a graphic designer with a warm laugh and absolutely no interest in my bank account. She liked me for my bad jokes and my love of old movies and the way I always remembered how she took her coffee. I told Harper about my family, about the 30 years of feeling invisible. She listened without judgment, held my hand, and said, "It sounds like you raised yourself. That is something to be proud of." Those words meant more to me than any number on any account statement ever could. Looking back now, I realize that my family's neglect, as painful as it was, shaped me in ways I never expected. It taught me resilience. It taught me to find validation within myself, rather than seeking it from others. It taught me that the people who are supposed to love you do not always know how, and that forgiveness is not about excusing their failures, but about freeing yourself from resentment. I still see my family, but on my terms now. The dynamics have shifted. They listen when I speak. They ask about my life. They treat me like a person who matters, not a ghost haunting the edges of the room. It took 30 years and a $4 million revelation, but I finally have a seat at the table. And here is the lesson I want to leave you with. If you are the invisible child in your family, if you are the one nobody believes in, do not let their blindness define your future. Build your empire in silence. Invest in yourself. Become so undeniable that when the moment comes, there will be no room for doubt. Not for them, for you. Because at the end of the day, the only approval that truly matters is the one you give yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? How did you prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched you, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you are not subscribed, yet join this community so you never miss another story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who might be feeling invisible in their own life. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being here. Remember, your worth is not determined by who sees you. It is determined by who you become. Until next time, keep building, keep believing, and never let anyone make you feel invisible again.